Hello, Andrew here. Welcome to lecture 4, the practical, where we're going to build a poster for. I've decided I'm going to build it for the virtual youth work element of the course, just to promote that. So I've a few materials that I've got hold of along those lines, and I'm going to just pull them together. Within this, I hope you've kind of had time to think about it, and you've got some sort of, photos and different sort of, be it logos or copy, a text copy that you'd want to include in a poster, in order to kind of, make this beneficial for you and just purposeful rather than just just running through a tutorial really. So what I got to do is I've built a poster canvas here. For a change, I decided to make it a landscape. So I'm just going to incorporate some of the elements there and play around with them. And through that, I suppose I'll just kind of start to unpack these different toolkits here. The most important thing to remember is it gets really intuitive after a while. Once you become familiar with it, then you can be quite creative with it. And it's like, tweaking and kind of polishing it, making for really clean images or doing different things like that. All these things will add to your finished sort of poster and just, help you kind of get used to these tools at the same breath. So I'd recommend playing around with it really, So for the moment, I'm just going to bring in a couple of different things. I have this image of all of you guys in, I believe it's Greece, possibly. Looks like Greece. So I'm going to use this as like a background poster image for that. And to do that, I don't want to bring in the whole of the image. But sorry, Darren. I'm just going to cut it a little bit to get rid of that sort of empty space at the top there. So I'm going to try this out and see what happens. If not, I can always tweak it. So let me just I just want to edit that. So I'm going to just select that. I want to zoom out slightly. Not that far. And I just want to kind of free transform, sorry. I want to free transform it a little bit. So I'm going to tweak it once more really to have it a bit bigger and constrained proportions as we decided before. So a few things I want to kind of address here. One is I'll bring in the other elements first and then I'll decide where I'm going to go from there. So I've got an image, a logo built up for this for the virtual youth work. I'm going to incorporate that, and we'll just include this now. Sure. So we have all our images. So if something gets a bit too noisy, you can just kind of hide it until you're ready for it. But essentially, we just I'm going to just start kind of playing around with this then and see where we go. So what am I going to do next? I'm going to get some, let me hide that for a second. I'm going to play around. I'm just going to put a tint on this just to take the kind of the mix of colors out of it a little bit and bring it down just a little bit. So let me just see if I can tone it a little bit. So we've got a sepia toned layer, but it's a bit heavy, so I want to I might just do it in terms of the, I'm going to step back from there and I'm going to just put a filter over it, but just a color sort of filter over it rather than the sepia tone, because it seems to have just gone to that automatic kind of blue color there, or the brownie color that we're looking at there. So I might just change I might just desaturate it first. We'll see how much of that we want to put on it. Again, these are, all things that can be, I'm just going to undo that again. And I'm going to, these are things you can kind of tweak a lot more with, I'm sure with GIMP and mostly with Photoshop as well. So I'm kind of just finding my way around here. So bear with me for a moment. So I just want to put if I just adjust the hue and saturation, we might be getting somewhere with that. So I just want to take some of the color out of it slightly. And we're just going to play around with the the hue seems okay. Whereas we can make this really noisy. No. So again, it's just really tweaking just kind of sliders of colors. So there we go. Colorized does seem to work, but I want to change the color of it. So we just go to the hue here and we can change the color of that. This is where I want it to be. So I just want to get something kind of warmer. Let me see. Maybe somewhere around there. I take the saturation down and the lightness. Let me see. We'll try this for a minute and see how it works. Those kind of dark colors look quite nice there. Okay, so instantly we can just see that there's you know, we've something resembling a sorry, wrong layer again. We've something resembling a kind of a poster image to play around with here. And again, as I said, this is just something where it's you will kind of, by playing around with it, you'll get a better understanding of what you want to do. Compositionally wise, you know, all these things to consider, where I looked at all that sort of the clear space there and just made it kind of a tighter image. Taking the color out of it, kind of abstracting it slightly so it beds in as like a black background image. Just that kind of filter overlay kind of crushes down the blacks a bit and makes it look kind of more interesting graphical image, I suppose. And just compositionally to kind of put the logo right in the middle there, where it's kind of, you know, might work where there's all these sort of eye lines and different things leading into the middle there. So everything's kind of working at the right angles, which, you know, holds it together. So all these are different things about like how composition would work and how images would work. A lot of it, you know, you can learn certain things. There is a certain amount of science behind it, but on top of that, there's also just a, you know, a lot of playing around that needs to be done with this as well, you know. So just bear with me one moment. There is a kind of a tagline that I want to find for this. I'm going to go, I'm just going to put some sort of text on it as well, like a banner slogan of what the course is or what it's entailing. And I have it from a web page that I would have built for the course. So just give me one moment to locate that. And then apart from that, I'm just going to put some images for all the different organizations that are a part of that. And we'll see how it works with those sort of images. I might tweak it. It's one of those things where if you kind of, you try it out and then show it to other people, or even just walk away from it and come back and you can see if something's actually working or if it's communicating what you really wanted to communicate. That's the vital sort of, the vital aspect of this, really, just to decide if it's working or not. So I wanted, one moment, I just want to copy some text here. And we have a slogan for an innovative, yeah, I'll just copy it in here and we'll see how it works. So, so there's our text. It's tiny. We need to make it bigger first. We also need to change the color, so I'll just brighten it up for a moment. We'll decide on whatever color we want now in a minute, but I just want to make it bigger for a moment. So there, and we want to, I'll center it for the moment there, just the alignments that we want, and then I'm going to change the font to something else. And again, this I'll show you now. There's a couple of links for different different fonts that you can download. Some of them even from the Pixlr website if you do set up an account with them. But again, this is the same as playing with the images. This is something where it can be, you know, you can just experiment and play around with it. Like a lot of people just, you know, would be more interested in working with type rather than images whatsoever. And there is a lot of kind of, you know, you can do really interesting graphical sort of graphics-based posters just from like different sort of fonts or typesets or different sort of elements of that in a vector sort of in a vector graphic sense that kind of look the part as well. So again, it's just, I just want to show you all the tools that are available. There is a website actually for that sort of sorry, not a website, a program much like GIMP and Pixlr for just working in vectors, which I'll include. Inkscape, I think it's called, and I'll dig out a copy of that and put it there as well. Again, it's a different application, but it is, again, it'd be a good sort of introduction for people who are interested in doing more vector-based graphics work. For anyone who is looking to use Adobe Illustrator, say, which would be the vector-based program of the Adobe package that would, you know, work alongside Photoshop there. So I'll put in the link to that as well. All right, Roboto Slab, I'll go with this one. This is quite nice. So an innovative based project, so we can see it's needs to certainly be on 2 lines. So I'm going to go back in there and edit that text, and we'll see how we get on with that. So again, this is all just, you know, by the eye that you'd want to, and we'll try it there and see what happens. And that was the wrong place to do it. We see an innovative skills of young people and youth workers in a digital media context. Okay, and we just make that slightly smaller. And we'll see if we can change it to bold, how it looks. And let me see. Okay, I'm gonna go with this for a minute. I'm gonna incorporate the logos now just to see how that looks, and we'll just see if we can tie it all together. Essentially, well, I'll do one other thing actually, just to kind of with one of the logos to kind of cut it out and get it ready so that we know what we're looking at. So I have actually, here's one I prepared earlier. I'll just pull this in. So we have the banner of logos of the different sort of organizations that are contributing to the project here. And we'll pull that in and see how that looks. And again, it's one of those things where it can kind of get a little bit washed out or a little bit lost on the background. So I might just, much like I did earlier, just apply a different layer, an adjustment layer. Why did I close that? And a different layer for the for just an opacity, something with an opacity at the background, just to kind of yeah, just to take the strong color out of that really. So just one moment and I'll get that together. So there's layer 8 once more. It's too much. We'll move layer 7 down a little bit because they're kind of floating up there. And again, if you use the up and down tabs, you can do stuff more precise here. So the more precise you're actually getting with it, you'll want to zoom in and out, which would be kind of, again, view. You can do zoom in, zoom out, which would be control or command plus or minus, depending on if you're on a Mac or a PC. And then just the different sort of sizes that you want, the actual pixels as well. There's that option to kind of, you know, change it to that. Okay, so let me just, oh, wrong layer. So, sorry, one sec, close that navigator, bring that up here. It's kind of awkward working in the smaller space just to fit it into the screen capture window. So that's the reason why I'm kind of a little bit cramped here. And we bring that back up. So they're all the way up. And this can possibly go down somewhat further. Let me see. And that's it. We'll see how that looks. Okay, so if you were, say for example, that's a poster essentially, where there's a lot of the required information that you might need to just kind of promote that. So for the moment, I'm just going to save that, just so we have a version of a poster. And then I'm going to kind of come back and just get stuck into these tools here, just so you can see what else you can do on top of that. Yeah, just to see how advanced you can get it. Image, Richard U poster, save that there. So it'll replace the one that I have. Okay, so say for example we wanted to go a different route and we wanted to bring in a different type of image, I suppose. Let's see, something where we'd want to kind of copy, cut it out and kind of copy stuff a little bit. So let me just see if I can do that. I'm going to open an image that we need to cut stuff out of, essentially, and see how we get on with that. So let me see what I have here. Okay, let me see. I'll just pull in this one for a minute just to see what we have. So if we want to select this, right, I'm just going to change the background color here for a minute. And I'm just going to make it a dark color so we can just see what happens if, you know, just to kind of cut out the different images and see different ways of doing that. So there we go. Okay, I'm going to just use this paint bucket, which is like a fill color, and that will just fill all that in with a certain sort of color. There we are. And likewise, if you wanted to kind of change that, you could vary the opacity of it, or you can go back in here and just tweak the color range that you'd want it to be. And then you have the hexadecimal color here, which is the, you know, that will work on every device if you were looking for a web or whatever like that. So you know the exact color, because sometimes different screens it looks like it has the same color, but it essentially doesn't. The difference in the screens and the calibrations can kind of throw your eye a little bit, whereas the hexadecimal color is the code for that particular color, and you see it kind of changes once we jump around here. So let's just pick out something a bit sort of a little bit warmer, I suppose, something a little bit warmer. So we go with this one, okay. And we just do that, and I'm going to just do, likewise just kind of paint over that so we have the different color there. Now I want to just introduce you to a few of these tools we're looking at here. I'll just do the rundown on them first and see what we need. Pencil tool will be literally as it says. You can't see it there because I'm drawing in the same color, but if I change that to black, we see it is a really thin pencil stroke there. And again, we can change the size of it. We can make something larger. And we see that we have like just a pencil for hand drawing or playing around like that. The amount of it we can introduce a larger amount. And basically all you can see is the weight is changing there with the different types. And again, we can change it to a different type of pencil line. So you've got an ink there where you can see it's like, you know, just that sort of marker effect. I'll zoom in so you can see it a little bit closer. But it'll give you that sort of, you know, it basically responds to the mouse click, that the closer you leave the mouse pointer in one place, it will give you a thicker image, like a marker image like that. So it's quite a nifty little tool. Again, I'm just going to run backwards through the history here so that we don't have to worry about that. And let me see where we are now. So the move tool is the main one. Like that's kind of the default one to go back to whenever you're trying to kind of orientate yourself around it, where it'll just help you move different items, as I've just done with the background there. We don't want to do that, but it'll just, once we have images on here, it will allow you to move that. So let's grab an image first, and then I'll run through the rest of them there so you can see how this will work. Okay, so we go free transform again. We want to edit, free transform, and we just make this robot larger. So obviously you can see here it's like that clip art background where it looks a little bit, you know, awkward looking, floating on a background with a cutout like that. So if we want to remove the background from this image, again, the quality is probably not good enough for me to make it that big. As we can see, it's kind of coming somewhat blurry there, so I'll make it a little bit smaller. That looks about as big as we're going to get it there before the image quality starts breaking up. So I'm just going to look at a few of the tools that we have here for doing this. So the wand tool, the magic wand tool is kind of handy, okay? So this is one thing we need to look at, the tolerance here, where there's different tolerances for, you know, an area of color essentially that we want to remove. So say if we wanted to remove all this white, it's essentially the same color barring the gray here. So if we set a tolerance which is quite low, that may capture that because it's all the same color area. We're not looking at like a mix of colors as you would in a photograph, say, of if you wanted to remove the greenery of a tree or something like that, a bit more advanced, where you'd want to kind of do that. So essentially we look at there and we just select that on 20. To all intents and purposes, it's cut out all that background white apart from here, and it's going to leave some sort of glow around the edges of it. So if we hold down the Shift key, you can add different areas to that, and it will continue to kind of cut out those different areas. So we're going to just try this. Again, this is what I'm doing it rushed, where all these sort of things, it's kind of fun to do as well, believe it or not, and you can get really interesting results when you begin to kind of clean it up like that, you know. So if we look at that, and we can see that we've got a bit of an awkward looking outline around it that we'll have a look at tidying up now in a minute. But essentially we've got rid of the background of this image. And let me just see where I'm going now with this. Sorry, 1 sec. So it's on that layer selected. And then we want to kind of erase that. So this would be just an eraser tool. So there are different ways to kind of remove the backgrounds from different images. So as we see there with a rubber, same idea. You can change the size to make it bigger if there's bigger areas to do. And it's just literally a case of learning to kind of get in and out of the image so that you can make it bigger or smaller to clean up like that. As you can see from the background there, there's, you know, some sort of broken edges where it didn't register the same tolerance level of the gray area of the white as it did on others. So essentially we have an image cut out there. If we could change this to smaller, and again, these are all really useful things to do just to learn how to kind of practice with it. If you make a mistake, just undo and it'll bring you back one step, so you can just kind of figure out, you know, how far you want to go back. Likewise, if you want to zoom in to get really detailed and reduce this to a very fine sort of finish, where you're more or less like, that'll be down to 1 pixel, where you're just removing 1 pixel at a time, which will take all day. But essentially, if you want to be really specific about it, you can get at it at that level as well, you know. Another handy thing with this is you can just kind of go in. There's a blur tool here which we look at. So if we had an area that we wanted to kind of blend that into the background, we could just select all that area and we'll increase the strength of that. The brush looks like a good size, but we make it a harder brush. So we can see all it's doing is spreading the tolerance of those pixels around and just blurring them out. I'll get in closer so you can see exactly what I'm doing there. So you can see that the edges just become softer once it's blurred. You could also use something called the smudge tool, something similar, which would be essentially like, you know, using charcoals and stuff like that, where it would just start pulling different colors around like that, and you can just play around, much as you would, you know, with a kind of a pastel, I suppose, or something like that. Let me just run down through these ones just to see what else we have. Color replace is pretty much that. If you want that sort of red color to be a different color, you just select whichever one you'd want it to turn to and then replace it. And you can see there, just from going around, it does a pretty good job at registering which color you're trying to swap out. So again, this is all, it's as detailed and as precise as you want it to be, essentially, you know. But overall, these are quite similar to what you would have across other image editing packages that would allow you to kind of change you know, these same sort of elements across the board. So I'm going to look at, let me see, the crop tool. The lasso tool is kind of an interesting one as well. If it'll, lasso is letting us select a certain, sorry, I'm all right here. It's not working as the lasso tool, so I'll come back to that in a moment. Sorry, just give me a second. I'll get through the ones I have. So this is the clone stamp tool, which again, this is kind of helpful if, let me see, I'll import the image of all of you guys again, and I'll just show you, because these ones are quite, you'll spot the differences a lot easier on a photograph. So here's a different sort of image. So if I just kind of zoom in here, so say for example we wanted to, what do we want to do? We want to get rid of this crease in the table. So this would be something where the clone stamp tool comes in kind of handy. So what you do is you control click an area. So it's going to select a certain area. Again, you can kind of do it with different size brushes or whatever like that. And then you're going to, actually it won't let me do this because the layer is locked. So let me just copy this to a new layer and then we should be able to do it. Sorry, that's just a little quirk with the little padlock that we saw there. It would just meant that I couldn't access that layer. The background layer comes locked, so it's like a double click on the padlock there will allow you to kind of change that. So essentially, yeah, that's what I've just done now. So let me just zoom in there and see if it's so we want to define the area. I'm not sure why that's not letting me do that. Apologies. Well, I'm on the wrong layer there, but on this layer it should be fine. And it's let me select the area. Essentially what I should be doing is if I hit the control click, it will pick this area, this region which is inside the circle there, with the large brush. So if I hit the control, select that area, and then I should just be able to kind of bring that over. So it's going to copy that area over and you can start patching in that sort of crease there. But for some reason it doesn't want to, I'm not reading this right. Could not use the clone stamp because the area to clone has not been defined. Control click to define a source point. Okay, so define the source point using a softer brush, and now I'm doing it now, but it's not letting me. I don't want to get too waylaid on this, so essentially that's what it should be doing. I'll clear up these sorts of inconsistencies of what I'm doing wrong. Essentially that's what it is. I'm doing something wrong and I'll come back to it there. Drawing tool, essentially like the pencil tool, does the same thing. A color replace tool we've looked at already. The blur tool, sharpen tool, you know, it'll help to a degree where there's a few different effects if you have a blurred image. Different ways of kind of cleaning up or blurring an image, and there's a few things that you can do, which is like filter. You can add some noise to the image. You see there's a different sort of, like you'll see how grainy this gets now, so it's like a TV static almost or something like that. But if you had a really blurred image, something like this can sometimes work, where you can kind of add a bit of noise to it and then go back in and just kind of employ the sort of you know, a sharpening image tool to make it appear a lot, sort of, you know, just to define it a little bit more. And again, these are the sorts of things once you get in really close and you look at, you'll be able to see some sort of distance. But again, like I said, I'd recommend just playing around with this stuff just to see what suits. Again, that could look like a style that you want, and you could just decide to add more noise or more sort of tools to it. So again, these are all like you know, Redeye Reduction. They're all really for tweaking the small details of it. So the sponge tool will be much like the clone tool. I'm not going to go near it just in case I can't get it working. But you just you select an area of an image. So it could be, say, the color blue on the t-shirts here, or any of this, and then apply that color elsewhere. Likewise, you know, you can take out certain sort of color samples from different items of clothing, be it hair or whatever like that, if you're trying to touch up and fix that. Redeye reduction is simply that, where it'll just locate the red in an eye for like flash retina flash photography, where you see this sort of red eye look, and you can just kind of clean that up and tweak it. So, you know, another good example of this is to get an old photograph that, you know, has all these sorts of defective qualities, or things that, you know, it looks like it could be improved, be it the red eye, the composition, if someone's hair is in their face or like that. Bring it into Pixlr or GIMP and start to kind of play around with that by removing certain things and taking different samples and getting down to a pixel level and changing it, and you really begin to see the power of how you can manipulate an image in Photoshop. So again, color picker is kind of an interesting one as well, where it'll just allow you to sample any, if we look down here, we can see it. It'll allow me to sample any sort of color on that table. And if we wanted to replicate it or to color in certain sort of areas of it, then we know we have the exact color that we're looking to use and to reference there. So another kind of handy thing to use like that. Let me see, the text we've looked at. I'm just going to, the hand tool will allow us just to move those objects around within that. But again, it's much like the hand tool here. So let me see what else we got. That seems to be everything in there. There's, yeah, just different styles for looking at it by the looks of things. And then you can just save like different color palettes here, so you can, you know, incorporate different ones or swap them out for different colors. So you can just kind of have those colors stored. Where am I? There we go. So again, if we want to swap that out, and we see we can have a store of color. So if you are working with a certain sort of color palette, you don't have to go running to kind of sample or reference the color of that image over and over again. You can just do it from there. Let me see what else I want to show you in here then. So again, these are all just things to play with. All I'd recommend there, you know, to get in, because it'll start getting quite bamboozling. Again, like, you know, just the clone tool does work. It was my issue there, an error, but it's I'm just not selecting the right layer in the right order. That's the only issue there. But overall, I just don't want to bamboozle you to think that it's like, if anything, it's never been quicker to kind of access stuff and to you know, begin to put projects together or images together using these technologies. So, you know, I'd say just bear all that in mind when it comes to you know, looking at what it is you want to do with this, or how frustrating it appears to be, you know, because as I said, it's never been easier to achieve these things. That's all I'm really gonna look at there. All I would recommend you just play around with it, get the hang of it. Please contact me if you have any questions about it. I will acknowledge what I've done there with the clone stamp tool and just figure out the exact order to that and include it, so you can see exactly how to do that. And I'll include a kind of a reference to accessing all these tools and how they work should you need that sort of frame of reference. But mostly what I can't stress enough, it's a really playful thing that you should be using, and there's any number of ways to put you know, images and posters and different designs together, and it's just a case of kind of learning how to do that is the trick, or just getting familiar with how to do that. So just one last thing I want to look at is with just different fonts that you might want to get, because they can be really good. And you can definitely make an image. There's any number of, you know, different websites you can go to for getting different fonts. And all you're really looking for is this download here, which will give you a zip file, essentially, mostly you get. And inside there you'll either get a TTF, which is a true type form, or an OTF file, and that's the text file that you need. And then you just want to install that font in your system. And then what have I just installed there? I haven't installed it because I need it to be, yeah, I need to select it. There's just a validation pops up sometimes on my computer. And then we should have a different, we have any number of different fonts that you can install from there and access for making your posters more interesting or better looking, you know. So let's say is just go through that and get familiar with how you're downloading them from. Most of these ones are free. It gives you a reference for what you're looking at, and there's any number of ways to put them together. And normally what happens is once you kind of log back in to the to Pixlr, you have to log out and log back in, and then the font will load up as a default down below here, for you to access it and start to put that to use then. That's pretty much it. It's kind of whistle-stop tour of it because we've got to go on and cover like video and audio as well. I hope just giving you enough of an introduction and giving you enough confidence seeing how quickly you can orientate yourself around around this image-based softwares and how powerful they are and how effective. And mostly that, you know, rather than even relying on, you know, buying a license for a piece of software, you literally just need Google Chrome and an internet connection for this particular one. And I have to say, I'm most impressed with it, you know, for something which is, you know, you can access within a browser. It's really, really powerful and really effective and has all the tools and all the same, you know, options that you would have with something like Adobe Photoshop. So I would wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone interested in graphics or graphic design to start out on and to kind of play around with this. As I said, I'll put links to all those errors that I've come across in the tools that I have been able to solve, so you have that sort of reference to it. I'll also put a link to Inkscape, which will be the SVG version, which I couldn't cover here, but it's a bit more advanced. It's essentially for vector graphics and building them. And it's like, you know, anyone who'd want to use Illustrator and use vectors for like larger sort of graphic files, it might be of interest to them. Mostly, again, it's free and it's downloadable like that. So it's a resource that you can get quite handily with that. As I said, barring that, just feel free to drop me a line if you need any help or, you know, advice or support on the back of what we've discussed. And I look forward to seeing all your posters very soon. Okay, see you in the next lecture. Thanks. Bye.